It was a warm afternoon in Manila, and Manny Pacquiao decided to take care of something most people would consider routine, a quick visit to the bank. Unlike many celebrities or politicians, Manny often preferred to move quietly without bodyguards or fanfare. That day he wore a plain polo shirt, simple jeans, and sneakers. To strangers, he looked like any other hard-working man stepping in to handle his business. Inside the bank, the air was cool, and the line of customers moved steadily. Manny waited patiently, smiling politely at a few people who glanced his way but didn't recognize him. For him, humility wasn't an act, and it was who he was. He didn't need to flaunt his wealth or position. When his turn came, Manny approached the counter and greeted the teller warmly. "Good afternoon," he said, sliding his withdrawal slip across the desk. The teller barely looked at him. Instead, she raised an eyebrow, her tone dismissive. "Do you even have an account here? This branch is for priority clients only." Manny was taken aback but stayed calm. "Yes, I do. I've been a client here for many years." Instead of checking the system, the teller gave him a long, skeptical look. Her voice grew sharper. "Sir, I think you should try another bank. This is not for walk-ins." Other customers turned their heads, sensing tension. Manny's wife had heard similar stories before, how people judged her husband by his simple clothes, not realizing who he was. Still, she stayed silent, watching how Manny would respond. Manny offered a gentle smile, refusing to let the disrespect rattle him. "I assure you I belong here. Could you please check my account?" But before the teller could answer, a manager walked by, overhearing just enough to make things worse. "What's the problem here?" the manager asked. The teller rolled her eyes slightly and replied, "This man is insisting he has an account, but..." The manager glanced at Manny with a cold expression as if he were wasting their time. He didn't even bother to check the details. "Sir, if you don't belong here, I'll have to ask you to leave." The room grew quiet. Whispers spread among the customers. No one, not even the bank staff, realized who was standing before them. No one in that bank had any idea who they had just disrespected. The silence in the bank lingered for a moment, broken only by the tapping of keyboards and the muffled footsteps of customers moving uneasily. Manny Pacquiao, standing tall but calm, had just been told to leave, not because of any mistake, but simply because the staff had judged him by his appearance. The teller crossed her arms impatiently, as if she had already decided Manny wasn't worth her time. "Sir, we can't process your request. Please don't hold up the line." Manny leaned slightly forward, his voice steady and respectful. "Ma'am, I only need to withdraw some money from my account. It should not take long." But the teller scoffed and glanced at her manager for support. The manager shook his head, already irritated. "Look, sir, this bank deals with large accounts. People don't just walk in here casually. Do you even know what you're asking?" The words stung, not because Manny cared about pride, but because of the injustice behind them. This was his bank, his money, and yet, the people entrusted to serve him had already placed him beneath their judgment. Around them, a few customers began whispering. Some looked embarrassed for Manny, while others chuckled quietly, enjoying the drama. A young man at the back pulled out his phone, subtly recording the interaction. Still, Manny remained composed. His hands rested lightly on the counter, and his expression carried no anger. "With respect, sir, it is your duty to serve all customers. I have an account here and I am entitled to use it no matter what I look like today." The manager smirked, his voice dripping with arrogance. "People say that all the time. Do you know how many claim to be someone they're not? If you cannot provide proof immediately, I'll have to ask security to escort you outside." Manny's wife, standing a few steps behind, shifted nervously. She whispered, "Let's just go. This isn't worth it." But Manny gave her a reassuring look, a silent promise that he would handle the situation with patience. The teller leaned back in her chair, clearly enjoying the spectacle. "Sir, without ID we can't do anything. Maybe you should try a different branch, one that fits your level." The last word rolled off her tongue with quiet disdain, as though she had measured Manny's worth in his clothes and dismissed him. By now, the energy in the room had shifted. Customers were no longer pretending not to watch. Mothers held their children close, men shook their heads, and a few whispered, "Why are they treating him like that?" One elderly woman muttered under her breath, "That's not right. Everyone deserves respect." But the staff were blind to the murmurs. They were too focused on defending their false sense of authority. Manny straightened his posture, his eyes calm but resolute. His voice carried a subtle firmness now. You see, this is the problem in our world today. People judge others by what they wear or how they look instead of treating them with fairness. I am not asking for special treatment. I am asking for the respect every customer deserves. His words hung in the air. For a brief second, the room went still. But instead of softening, the manager chuckled dismissively, as though Manny's calm wisdom was nothing more than empty talk. Spare us the speeches. This is a business, not a classroom. Either show proof or leave. A few people gasped quietly at the manager's tone. The young man recording zoomed in closer, sensing something important was unfolding. Security guards, unsure of what was truly happening, stepped closer to Manny. They weren't aggressive, but their presence made the atmosphere heavier. The teller crossed her arms with a small, satisfied smile, as if she had won a battle, but Manny didn't flinch. He looked at the guards, then back at the staff and said softly, I will leave if you wish, but remember this moment because one day you may realize who it is you turned away and why it mattered. The crowd stirred. Whispers grew louder now, rippling across the bank lobby like a wave. Some customers pulled out their phones. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Still, the staff remained clueless, too blinded by arrogance to recognize the humility and dignity of the man before them. And with that, Manny allowed himself to be led toward the doors, quiet, calm, unshaken. But what the bank staff didn't know was that in less than 10 minutes, the truth would crash down on them with a force more powerful than any punch Manny had ever thrown. Have you ever seen someone treated unfairly just because of how they looked? Type yes in the comments and tell us where you're watching this from. The heavy glass doors of the bank swung shut behind Manny Pacquiao as the two security guards escorted him outside. To anyone watching, it looked as if an unimportant man had been thrown out of a place where he didn't belong. The teller smirked from behind her counter. The manager straightened his tie, proud of the decision he'd made. To them, it was just another routine dismissal. Another customer judged, dismissed, forgotten. But outside, the humiliation weighed differently. Manny stood on the steps of the bank, his wife by his side, his children clinging quietly to her. His face remained calm, almost serene, but there was a heaviness in his eyes. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about pride. It was about something deeper, the painful reality that prejudice and arrogance could strip even the simplest dignity from a man, regardless of who he was. For a moment, silence lingered, and then the whispers started. That was unfair, a woman muttered as she stepped out of the bank. They didn't even check his account, another said, shaking her head. Why treat him like that? He was polite the whole time. One man in the crowd, phone in hand, muttered into his recording. Look how they treated this guy. He didn't do anything wrong. Just because of his clothes? The humiliation wasn't private anymore. It was public. Every glance, every whisper carried judgment. Not against Manny, but against the bank staff inside who had thrown him out. Yet the sting was still sharp. His wife placed a hand on his arm. Please, let's just go, she whispered, her voice trembling. The kids are scared. Manny turned to her gently. Don't worry, he said softly. This is just another test of patience. His children looked up at him, confused. To them, their father was always a source of strength, the man who had stood toe-to-toe with giants in the ring. But now they saw him endure something different, not punches or blows, but the cruelty of being belittled. Inside, the staff carried on as if nothing had happened. The teller laughed quietly with another employee, whispering jokes at Manny's expense. The manager boasted about how he had protected the bank from suspicious people. Their arrogance was on full display, blind to the truth just outside their doors. The crowd outside grew larger. Some passers-by stopped, curious about the commotion. The young man who had been recording posted a clip online, his caption bold, "Bank throws out humble man without even checking his account. Pure discrimination." Within minutes it began to spread. Manny remained silent, standing tall, his arms folded loosely in front of him. He could have raised his voice. He could have demanded recognition. He could have pulled rank and revealed his name. But that wasn't his way. To fight injustice with arrogance would only mirror the behavior of those who wronged him. Instead, he chose patience. The crowd, however, felt the injustice deeply. If they can treat him like that, one man said, what about the rest of us? What about the poor who walk in, dressed even more simply? That was the true weight of the moment. It wasn't just about Manny Pacquiao. It was about everyone who had ever been judged by their clothes, their accent, their appearance, and everyone who had been told, "You don't belong here." Manny, in his humility, was now a reflection of them all. Inside the bank, the arrogance continued. The teller tapped her nails on the counter, muttering, "People like that waste our time." The manager added with a smirk, "He'll think twice before walking into this branch again." But outside, a storm was brewing. Customers leaving the bank paused to shake Manny's hand, apologizing for what they had witnessed. "You didn't deserve that," an elderly woman said softly. A younger man added, "Respect shouldn't depend on a suit and tie. You're right to stand your ground." Manny nodded humbly, offering nothing more than a calm, "Thank you." The security guards, who had followed instructions to escort him out, now stood awkwardly nearby. Even they seemed uncomfortable, realizing the man they had treated as just another customer carried himself with a dignity far greater than the managers inside. Minutes passed. The tension thickened. Online, the video clip began gaining traction, comments flooding in. "This is discrimination, plain and simple. Banks like this don't deserve loyal clients. Who is that man? He handled it better than most people would." And then a shift began. A few people in the growing crowd outside squinted at Manny, their eyes widening in recognition. "Wait, isn't that?" one whispered. "That's Manny Pacquiao," another said, her voice trembling with shock. "No way, the senator? The champion?" The whispers spread like fire. The same man they had just seen disrespected and escorted out was the very man known worldwide as a hero, a fighter, a man of the people. Inside the bank, the teller and manager still laughed, blind to the storm that was about to consume them. Outside, however, the air was electric. The humiliation had reached its peak, but so had the anticipation. Something was about to change. The staff thought they had humiliated an ordinary man. In just a few moments, they would realize the truth, and their arrogance would cost them everything. The buzz outside the bank grew louder with every passing minute. What had begun as murmurs of discontent had now become a steady wave of whispers. Customers exiting the bank paused, their eyes darting between the calm, simple man standing quietly on the steps and the bank's polished glass doors. A teenager in the crowd was the first to say it loudly. "That's Manny Pacquiao." The words rippled instantly. A few heads turned sharply. A man pulled out his phone, scrolled through photos, and then held the screen up for others to see. "Look, it's him. That's Pacquiao. Same haircut, same face," the crowd gasped. People who had been unsure now leaned in for a better look. Some covered their mouths in disbelief. "You're right. That's the people's champ. Wait, the Manny Pacquiao? The world champion? Yes, that's him. The senator." Within moments, the energy shifted completely. The man the bank staff had dismissed as ordinary was now recognized as one of the most respected figures in the country. Not just a boxing legend, but a philanthropist, a senator, a national hero. Yet Manny himself did nothing to reveal it. He stood quietly, his arms resting loosely, his eyes calm, as if none of the recognition mattered. His wife, however, could see the wave of realization spreading. She whispered, "They know. They're starting to see who you are." Manny only nodded gently, whispering back, "Let them, but let's not use fame to demand respect. Let them realize their mistake on their own." The irony was sharp. Inside the bank, the teller leaned against her chair, bragging softly to another employee about how she had handled the situation. The manager puffed his chest with pride, convinced he had defended the bank's dignity. They laughed at Manny's expense while just outside, dozens of people were realizing the magnitude of their mistake. Phones were everywhere now. People recorded videos, snapping pictures, narrating the injustice they had just witnessed. Online, the clips were spreading like wildfire. One video caption read, "Bank humiliates Manny Pacquiao without realizing who he is." Within minutes, thousands of views turned into tens of thousands. And still, Manny remained humble. He did not storm back into the bank. He did not shout. He did not gloat. His silence was more powerful than any outburst could ever be. A middle-aged man in the crowd approached him carefully, removing his hat in respect. "Sir Manny," he said softly, "I am so sorry for what they did to you." You didn't deserve that." Others joined in, nodding in agreement, offering words of support. A young woman, tears in her eyes, whispered, "If they can treat you this way, what about the poor who have no voice at all?" That was the heart of the matter. This moment was no longer just about Manny Pacquiao. It was about every ordinary Filipino who had walked into a place of business only to be judged, humiliated, or cast aside because of appearance. Manny had become the mirror through which people saw their own struggles. Inside, the staff remained oblivious. The teller scoffed when she noticed the growing crowd. "What's the fuss about?" she muttered. The manager peeked outside and frowned, irritated by the gathering. These people should move along, probably just nosy bystanders. But their arrogance was cracking. A second later, a customer inside, by an older man who had been standing in line, stepped forward and addressed the teller directly. "Do you know who you just threw out?" His voice carried both anger and disbelief. The teller rolled her eyes. "Another one of his friends?" "No," the man said firmly. "That's Manny Pacquiao, the world champion, the senator, the man who built schools and gave homes to the poor." The color drained from the teller's face. She glanced at the manager, whose smug confidence faltered instantly. For a moment, silence consumed the entire lobby. The staff stared at one another, suddenly unsure. Back outside, the recognition had grown into a wave of support. Dozens of voices rose in unison. "That's our champ. You can't treat Manny Pacquiao like that. He's a hero not just for boxing, but for our people." The crowd clapped, some even chanting his name softly. Manny raised a hand gently, signaling for calm. "Please," he said softly, his voice barely above the hum of the crowd. "This is not about me. This is about respect. Today it is me, tomorrow it could be anyone else. No one should be treated this way." The crowd quieted, his words sinking deep, and then, like a wave crashing back, the bank door swung open. The teller, pale and trembling, stepped outside, followed by the manager who struggled to keep his composure. Their arrogance had collapsed, replaced by shame and panic. But Manny, standing tall and humble, did not meet them with anger. Instead, his steady eyes conveyed a message far greater than power or status. Dignity. The staff's humiliation was only beginning, but Manny had already chosen the higher road. The bank staff finally realized who they had disrespected. But the real shock was still to come, because Manny's response would humble them all. The bank's glass doors creaked as the teller and manager stepped outside, their arrogance drained, replaced by pale, trembling faces. The crowd had swelled, phones raised high, whispers echoing like thunder. Everyone now knew the truth. The man they had humiliated was no ordinary customer. He was Manny Pacquiao, the people's champ, the senator, the philanthropist who had given so much back to his people. The teller's lips quivered as she tried to speak. "So, sir, we didn't realize," but Manny raised his hand gently, silencing her without a single word. His calm presence was stronger than any scolding could ever be. The crowd hushed instantly, all eyes locked on him. Manny's voice was steady, warm, but carried an unmistakable weight. "You see," he began, "this is the danger of judging people by appearance. Today, you saw a man in simple clothes and decided he did not belong. You denied him the dignity every person deserves. And now, because you recognize my name, you regret it. But what about the thousands of others who are not known? What about the poor man who enters this bank to withdraw the little savings he has? What about the mother who comes in to pay her bills dressed in worn clothes? Do they not deserve the same respect?" The words struck like lightning. The teller's eyes filled with tears. The manager looked down at his polished shoes, unable to meet Manny's gaze. The security guards who had escorted him out shifted uncomfortably, shame written across their faces. Manny paused, his eyes sweeping across the crowd. Respect should not be reserved for those with fame or power. Respect should be given to every human being. You have all seen today how quick judgment can cause humiliation. But remember, status, money, or appearance do not define a person's worth. Character does. A hush blanketed the crowd. Even those recording lowered their phones slightly, absorbed in the gravity of his words. This was not a lecture born of anger. It was a lesson carved from humility, from the heart of a man who had known both poverty and power, both ridicule and respect. The manager finally stammered, "Senator Pacquiao, we truly apologize. Please forgive us. We didn't mean." Manny cut him off, not with hostility but with calm strength. "You didn't mean?" "No, you meant it. Your actions came from the heart, from the way you saw me, from the judgment you carried. And today it happened to me. But I tell you again, it happens to others every single day. People less privileged, people without cameras watching, people without a name. They suffer in silence and no one records their humiliation. The crowd erupted with murmurs of agreement. He's right. That's true. We've all seen it. One woman in the crowd shouted, "We need leaders who speak like this." Manny's wife looked at him proudly, her eyes glistening. His children, once nervous, now stood taller, watching their father turn humiliation into a moment of power and justice. The teller broke down, her voice shaking. "Please, sir, I didn't know. I thought you were less than you," Manny finished softly. His words were not cruel. They were matter of fact, exposing the truth that cut sharper than any rebuke. "You thought I was less, and that is the problem. No one is less. No one deserves to be treated as if their presence is a burden." Silence fell again. The only sound was the wind rustling through the crowd gathered outside the bank. Manny stepped forward slightly, his voice now resonating with a deeper firmness. "I do not stand here for myself. I stand here for the countless Filipinos who endure this kind of treatment every day, for the farmers who are looked down upon, for the street vendors ignored as invisible, for the workers judged by the dirt on their hands instead of the dignity of their labor. If my name was not Manny Pacquiao, I would have walked away humiliated, just like so many others. And that is what must change." The crowd broke into applause, clapping not in fandom but in solidarity. Some cheered his name, others shouted, "Respect for all." The atmosphere was electric, not because a celebrity was present, but because a truth that lived in the hearts of ordinary people had finally been spoken aloud. Manny raised his hand once more, calming the noise. "Let this be a reminder to us all. Respect must never depend on fame, power, or wealth. True respect comes from recognizing our shared humanity." His words carried weight not just in that moment, but far beyond the bank's glass walls. The staff lowered their heads, drowning in their own shame. The manager, once smug and arrogant, could no longer speak. The teller wiped tears from her cheeks, realizing too late the cruelty of her actions. Manny's voice softened now, as he looked at them one last time. "I do not need your apology, but I ask you, the next time someone walks through those doors, whether rich or poor, dressed in silk or in rags, treat them with the respect you denied me today." The crowd thundered with applause echoing through the streets. For the first time, the bank that had been filled with arrogance now stood humbled, its staff exposed, its lesson immortalized. The staff had been silenced, the crowd inspired. But the moment was not over yet, because what came next would shake the entire bank to its core. The air outside the bank was thick with tension and anticipation. Manny's words had shaken the crowd, his message about dignity and respect echoing in every corner of the street. The applause had barely died down when another shift began. From across the lobby, a senior officer from the bank's headquarters rushed in, alerted by the commotion and the rapidly growing crowd outside. He was sweating, his phone buzzing nonstop with messages. The video of the incident had already gone viral online. Social media feeds were exploding with outrage. Headlines were forming in real time. Bank staff humiliate Manny Pacquiao. National hero disrespected in his own bank. The officer spotted Manny instantly and froze, his eyes widening in shock. He pushed past the stunned teller and manager, hurrying outside. "Senator Pacquiao," he exclaimed breathlessly, bowing his head. "Sir, please accept my deepest apologies. This is unacceptable. Unforgivable!" The crowd roared. Phones shot upward, recording every word. The same staff who had treated Manny like a nuisance just minutes ago now looked as though the ground had vanished beneath them. The teller's face turned ghostly pale. The manager's chest sank, his tie suddenly feeling like a noose. They exchanged panicked glances, knowing what was coming. The senior officer turned sharply toward them, his voice thunderous. "You have humiliated our institution. You have humiliated this nation. Do you even know who you have disrespected? This man is not just a senator, not just a champion. He is the pride of the Filipino people. And you dared to treat him like dirt?" The crowd erupted in cheers at his words. "That's right," someone shouted. "Fire them," another yelled. The chants grew louder. "Fire them! Fire them! Fire them!" The teller collapsed into tears, sobbing. "I didn't know. I didn't know." The manager tried to defend himself weakly, stammering, "We were only following procedure." But the officer cut him off with fury. "Procedure? Respect is not a procedure. Respect is a duty. And you failed miserably." He turned to the guards, his hand pointing firmly. "Escort them out. Effective immediately, they are terminated. This bank has no room for arrogance and prejudice." Gasps swept through the crowd as the guards, now reluctant but obedient, stepped forward. The teller begged, her hands trembling. The manager resisted, his pride collapsing in public humiliation. Yet both were walked out through the very doors they had once used to throw Manny out. The irony was brutal, and the crowd erupted in applause. Justice had been served, swiftly, publicly, undeniably. Some clapped, others shouted in triumph, and dozens more recorded the entire scene, their videos destined to reach millions within hours. But amid the chaos, Manny remained composed. He did not smile at their downfall. He did not bask in their humiliation. Instead, he raised his hand once again, calming the cheering crowd. His voice was gentle, steady, yet powerful enough to silence the noise. "Please," he said softly, "do not celebrate their pain. Learn from it." The crowd quieted instantly, struck by his humility. Manny continued, "It is right that actions have consequences. But let this not be about revenge. Let it be about change. Today you saw how arrogance and judgment can destroy dignity. Tomorrow let us treat every man and woman, whether poor or rich, with fairness." The senior officer bowed his head again, ashamed yet grateful for Manny's grace. "Senator, we will make sure this never happens again. Your words will not be forgotten." Manny nodded, his eyes sweeping across the crowd. "I do not ask for special treatment. I ask for equal treatment, for me, for you, for everyone. That is the only way we can build a nation of respect." The crowd erupted once more, but this time not in wild celebration, in admiration. They weren't cheering a celebrity. They were cheering a man who had turned humiliation into a lesson, injustice into inspiration. One elderly man wiped tears from his eyes and whispered, "This is why he is not just a champion in the ring. He is a champion of the people." The security guards who had earlier escorted Manny out now bowed their heads toward him, silently apologizing. Manny, in return, placed a hand gently on one guard's shoulder and said, "Do not be ashamed. What matters is what we do next." The scene was unforgettable. The arrogant humbled, the crowd enlightened, and Manny Pacquiao standing tall, not as a fighter, not as a senator, but as a man whose humility carried more power than any title. By the time Manny and his family quietly left the bank, the story had already reached the world. The clip of him standing firm yet humble spread across every platform, gathering millions of views. But for Manny, it wasn't about going viral. It was about planting a seed of respect, a reminder that dignity belongs to everyone regardless of status. The humiliation had been reversed, the lesson delivered, and the guilty punished. But what came after, online and across the nation, would turn this story into a worldwide movement. By the time Manny Pacquiao and his family reached home that evening, the story had already taken on a life of its own. What had begun as a quiet trip to the bank had exploded into a national conversation about dignity, prejudice, and respect. On social media, videos of the incident were everywhere. Clips of the teller's dismissive tone, the manager's arrogance, and most importantly, Manny's calm and powerful response had been viewed millions of times within hours. Hashtags like "Respect All," Manny Pacquiao, and "Dignity for All" trended not just in the Philippines but across the world. News anchors replayed the footage on primetime television. Commentators marveled at how Manny had handled humiliation without anger, turning the moment into a public lesson. One headline read, "Manny Pacquiao teaches the world a lesson in humility." Another said, "Disrespected but dignified, Pacquiao shows true strength outside the ring." Ordinary people shared their own stories online, connecting deeply with what they had witnessed. One mother wrote, "I once walked into a bank and was ignored because of my clothes. Watching Manny go through the same made me cry, but his words gave me hope." Another user commented, "If even Pacquiao can be treated like this, imagine what happens to ordinary workers every day. We need change." The video clips didn't just show the arrogance of the bank staff, they highlighted Manny's response. Calm, respectful, but firm. In one widely shared snippet, his voice carried over the crowd. Respect should not depend on status. Respect should be given to every human being. That line alone became a rallying cry. Posters, memes, and quotes filled timelines, spreading the message far beyond the incident itself. Meanwhile, the bank's corporate office released an official statement apologizing publicly to Manny Pacquiao and the Filipino people. They announced mandatory training on respect and customer service for all employees nationwide, promising to ensure that no one, regardless of appearance or background, will ever experience such treatment again. But for the people, the apology mattered less than the lesson. Manny had turned personal humiliation into a universal message. In interviews, when asked how he felt about the incident, Manny remained humble. "I do not feel anger," he told reporters. "I feel sadness that people are judged this way. But I also feel hope, because maybe now we will realize how important it is to treat each other with dignity." Crowds cheered outside his home when he appeared briefly to greet them. He smiled, waved, and said only, "This is not about me. This is about all of us. Remember, no one is less." The story spread internationally. In the United States, sports channels replayed the incident alongside highlights of his legendary fights, praising how the same calm focus he carried in the ring had guided him in real life. In Europe, newspapers printed his quotes, framing them as a universal call for equality. Even humanitarian organizations praised the way he had used the moment to shine a light on everyday injustices. What stood out most to people was how Manny never gloated. He did not celebrate the staff's firing, nor did he relish in their downfall. Instead, he asked people not to cheer for revenge but to learn compassion. That humility elevated him above the incident itself. An elderly man interviewed on the street summed it up perfectly. "Manny Pacquiao has won many fights in the ring, but this was his greatest victory, because he fought not with fists but with dignity." In homes across the country, families replayed the video. Parents pointed to Manny's response as an example for their children. Teachers discussed it in classrooms, framing it as a lesson in ethics and respect. Even pastors quoted his words in Sunday sermons, reminding congregations that true strength lies in humility. The incident became more than a viral story. It became a symbol, a reminder that respect should not be conditional, that dignity is not earned by fame but by being human. And so, from what began as a humiliating afternoon, Manny had sparked a global conversation. One man's calm resistance had turned into a movement. One voice had reminded millions of a simple truth too often forgotten: we are all worthy of respect. As the sun set on the following day, Manny sat quietly with his family. His wife looked at him with admiration. "You turned their cruelty into a lesson for the world," she said softly. Manny smiled, shaking his head. "No," he replied. "I only reminded them of what we should all already know." The lesson was clear. Fame fades, wealth can vanish, but respect is the foundation of human dignity. And in that moment, Manny Pacquiao had shown the world that true champions don't just fight in the ring. They fight for justice, equality, and respect. If you believe no one should ever be judged by their appearance, type respect in the comments and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.